So taking my son back to college, or to start college in the last couple weeks, brought back a lot of memories to me, walking into a dorm room and remembering how small an area it was to live in and all of that. And one of the memories that came back was as a senior in high school, I bought a dartboard. I went to the Sam's Club in our town. They had a dartboard there in the little sporting goods area. And I bought this dartboard, and some friends of mine and I would play darts a lot, and I actually got pretty decent at darts for a while. And so when it came time to go to college, I took this dartboard with me. And this is before the days of the little soft-tip darts with the holes in the board. No, these are real darts that you throw at things. I will tell you, my favorite joke to play on anybody was to casually unscrew the tip of the dart that had the metal part on it, and then throw the plastic part and watch them panic in terror, as there was no tip on it at all to hurt them. It was just like this flimsy piece of plastic. But anyhow, I was looking for a place in my dorm room to put the dartboard. And there was one wall that had windows on it. I couldn't put it there. There was a wall where my microwave was, and although I was good at darts, I wasn't that confident, so I wouldn't put it there. There was another wall where the TV was. I sure wasn't going to put it there. There were two walls with beds on them, and I didn't want to have to climb over a bed every time to retrieve the darts, so I finally came up with the closet door. And so I mounted this dartboard to my closet door. And generally speaking, I was good enough at darts that even if I missed, I would miss on the dartboard. I would still be in that little circle of stuff. Now, my next door neighbor, Brad, loved to aggravate me. And so Brad would come over, and Brad would intentionally throw those darts as hard as he could at the closet door. And so by the end of the semester, I had a closet door that looked like Swiss cheese. There were just holes all over it. And when we wanted to go get our key deposit back, we had to make sure all the holes were filled in the room. And that's when I learned the secret of the dorms at Harding. Guys had figured out somewhere along the way that Colgate toothpaste, the old-fashioned white Colgate toothpaste, was exactly the same color as the closet doors. And so rather than go spend $3 at Walmart on spackle, they would take what was left of their Colgate toothpaste and fill in all the holes on the closet door. And I thought, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen, and now I know why all the rooms are minty fresh. But it worked perfectly, as everybody would go in and fill those holes. And if you were to come in and inspect the room, you would not get what you thought you were going to get. I thought of, as we were getting ready for today, that, and the other thing I thought of was the house we lived in next to the church building in Searcy. And in that house that we lived in, I started to hang things on the wall. The first thing I figured out was that if I used a level to hang a picture on the wall, the picture did not look straight because the entire house was not level. And so I learned very quickly what I need to do is just measure from the ceiling and try to hit the same spot on both sides. And I know it's not level, but at least it looks level. The other thing I learned after putting the stud finder up was it meant nothing. And so I kept looking for where the studs were, and I would put a nail in that stud, and then I would move over 16 inches. And I would go to drive another nail or drill another hole, and it would just go straight through the drywall. And I would realize there's not a stud there. And so then I thought, maybe it's 18 inches. It's a 100-year-old house. And so I went over another 2 inches and straight through the drywall. And finally, I hit a point where I think it was 20 or 22 inches. There was another stud, and I put another screw there. And then I thought, well, it'll surely be 22 next time. And I went over and no, just straight through. Nothing was regular. And the reason we're looking at inside the walls today is if you've ever had that experience, especially with an older house, a lot of times what you expect to find is not what you find. Newer homes, there's all these inspections and things, and it's probably a little more regular most of the time, but every now and then it's not. There was a brand new neighborhood that was built in Valonia, Arkansas. And in Valonia, what I learned after living in Searcy for a while was Valonia is a place where the tornadoes like to go. And they had a huge tornado go through Valonia, and everybody was pretty positive it was an F5 because they went into this new neighborhood and they found that there was an entire street where all that was left was foundations. And there was just house after house after house where all you found was a cement slab. And so they were pretty confident this is going to be an F5 because that's how they judged the F5 tornado, or the EF5 now, I guess. Later, what they found out was they downgraded it to an EF4 because the people who built the houses did not bolt the walls to the foundations. The walls were all sitting on top of the foundations, but those bolts that are supposed to come out, the way they decide an EF5 is it just shears those things right off and takes the house with it. Since it didn't do that, they made it an EF4, and they learned that inside the walls was not what they expected. Now, the reason for our imagery with this is, for a lot of Christians, what is on the inside is not what you see on the outside. And so in Matthew 6, Jesus addresses that because he's surrounded by a world of religious leaders who look put together, biblically knowledgeable, look like everything is right on the outside, but what is on the inside is not the same. And so he tells the people who are going to follow him, what really matters here is what's on the inside. So as we go through this, I want you to remember what we looked at a few weeks back in Matthew 5, and I want you to think of the fact that these chapter and verse divisions were put in by people somewhere along the road later. I think God's fine with them, or we wouldn't have them the way that they are. But at the same time, we do need to recognize these are divisions that were placed there not by God, but by people somewhere along the way. And so this phrase that we looked at back in Matthew 5 from the commentary, the Story of God commentary, that Matthew 5:17 through 20 is the most significant passage in the Bible on how to read the Bible, I think is still pretty applicable as we get here into Matthew 6. And so we asked the question several times, how do we read the Bible? And as we look through those last two sections of Matthew 5, we looked at how we read the Bible about lust and anger and all of these different things. We'll still ask that question, but in a little different way today. And we're going to ask, how do we read the Bible about authenticity? Because Matthew 6 addresses a lot of what it is like to live authentically as a Christian. What it is like to live a life that is transparent, that what is on the inside is the same as what is on the outside. And so I want to do this a little differently today, and I'm going to give you a disclaimer as we start, because sometimes people really like this, and sometimes people will immediately think there's something wrong with our preacher and we need to have a meeting. So let me explain to you. I'm going to use a little bit this morning the message. I think in the 2.5 years I've been with you, this is the second time I've used the message for anything. And so the reason I want the disclaimer here is this. I don't know if you can see it from where you're at, but in the small print, you have the Bible in contemporary language. And so what you need to understand about Bible translations, most of the verses we'll look at today are in the English Standard Version. I like it. It's a good mix of readable and accurate, and so I feel like it's a good translation for us to use. Been using it the whole time I've been here. Now, we usually will use a translation, which generally means people get there with the Greek language. There's some kind of committee most of the time that gets together, and they work their way through the Greek language, translate it into another language. That's what they did with the ESV, with the NAS, with all those different versions we look at. They will do that in different ways. Sometimes they will do it word by word. Sometimes they'll do it verse by verse. Sometimes they'll look at a paragraph and say, what is this paragraph saying? And they'll put that in English. What the message is one guy. And you'll see something you don't normally see on your Bible, which is the author's name at the bottom, okay? And so you see Eugene Peterson here. Eugene Peterson has paraphrased the Bible in contemporary language, which is to say, this should not be your primary version of the Bible, okay? But at the same time, it's kind of like what a commentary would do, just a little more concisely. And so it's a handy study tool. And so I want to look at his imagery for one reason this morning. He uses the imagery of theater, which I think applies pretty well in Matthew 6. What the Pharisees are doing, what a lot of the religious leaders of the time are doing, is putting on a show. And he's going to address that in 3 different areas in Matthew 6. But I think it will be helpful for us to see that as we look through this. So Matthew 6, we will look at, to begin, how does authenticity apply to giving? In other words, how do we give authentically? One thing, by the way, that I really like about online giving, I don't know how you feel about it. Some people probably like it, think it's convenient. Some people don't and just think we need to have them passing trays and put things in there. The thing I like about it is nobody really knows what anybody else is doing. You're giving what you're giving. It's between you and God, and it's just there. There's no question about it. There's no look at me and what I'm doing. There's no way to do that because it's all private. So Jesus says, and by the way, as we look through these, the ones that are the message, I'll have that little message graphic on there. These are all ESV that we're starting with. In Matthew 6:1, he says, beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. Now, the way Peterson puts it in the message is this. Be especially careful when you are trying to be good so that you don't make a performance out of it. It might be good theater, but the God who made you won't be applauding. I really like that image. I think of, Nathan was in the play over at Ada last year. They did Cinderella, the musical for the play. And after the play, you got to see all these people you had seen on stage out in the foyer of the auditorium. And they looked different than they did on stage. You could make out the things that they were trying to do with makeup to appear one way on stage. There was one guy who played a giant, and he came out, and at one point he kind of opened up the outfit he was wearing, and you could see the stilts that he was standing on. There were all kinds of things like that you began to recognize, this is how the play comes together. And I like his imagery here because this is definitely not how we want to live. Now, unfortunately, it is how a lot of people do live. They live in such a way to try to put on a show so others can see. Jesus continues in verse 2. He says, "Thus, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward." Jesus, I think, is using a little bit of hyperbole too. But could you imagine what this would be like in our context nowadays? First of all, we'd recoil at the trumpet because we got all our other reasons. But if someone came in with a trumpet before them to announce, "Look at what I am doing." If we had the baskets in the back, which we do, and there was a person back there that would say, "Look at how much this check is. Isn't this impressive what he's doing for God?" How would you feel about that? I think a lot of us would feel in different ways. I think some of us would be very put off by that. If you were visiting this morning, I would almost guarantee you would not be visiting next Sunday because you would think those people are crazy and they're all about the wrong things. You may feel like you're not quite good enough because the amount you're putting in there is not anywhere near what someone else just did. Or maybe you just feel very annoyed by that person. There are a lot of ways we can feel as a result of that, but Jesus said, don't do it in this way. But when you give to the needy, verse 3, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Giving is about others, not us. If we give for our entire lives and no one ever knows that we did, we're doing it the right way. That's not the way our world is geared. Again, thinking about Harding, and I think I've told you this joke before, there was a running joke at Harding when it came to service projects of how many Harding students would it take to change a light bulb? And the answer was always two, one to change the bulb and the other to order the t-shirts. We always had this thing where if there was anything going on, there had to be a t-shirt, and Harding alone is not guilty of that. There are so many shirts and things and ways we announce what we're doing, and it's a struggle for us. And I will tell you a little secret. If you are doing good, at some point, somebody is going to notice. And I know that's not the reason we need to be doing it, and I know that Jesus is saying, you do this for other people, you do this for God, you don't do this for self. But when you are doing good things, at some point, somebody is going to notice, and a little bit of that is going to come your way anyway. And I know we don't do it for that reasons, but it does tend to come along. Now, how does authenticity apply to prayer? How do we pray in an authentic kind of way? And when you pray, verse 5, you must not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners that they may be seen by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. Or the way Peterson puts it in the Message. And when you come before God, don't turn that into a theatrical production. All these people making a regular show out of their prayers, hoping for stardom, do you think God sits in a box seat? Now, I think a lot of people in our world think the answer to that question is yes. They imagine God, and I hope this doesn't seem too sacrilegious, but almost like those two guys on the Muppets. Do you remember those guys? And they would sit up in the box seats and they would complain about everything that was going on. I think a lot of people picture God in that way. Or maybe like the important person that would sit in the box seats in the opera, and everybody would know that that is their seats up there. God doesn't operate in that way. God is not here for a show. But when you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. And when you pray, do not heap up empty phrases as the Gentiles do, for they think that they will be heard for their winning words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him. Pray then like this: Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. If God knows what we need, he also knows why we pray. That same God that knows the things we need before we even say it, who understands the yearnings of our heart that only come out in groans, he also knows the reason we are asking for and saying these things. And so when you are saying words that are empty, they're just that. They are empty words. We can put on the greatest performance in the world, but we will not fool God. I think of Richard as a band director. There are a lot of times that a band will play something, or a lot of times a chorus will sing something, and they will leave the stage just mortified because they know they messed up that note or they know they messed up something, and 9 times out of 10, the people in the audience have no idea it happened. There's one little thing that they wanted to do a certain way, they didn't quite get there, and almost all the time people don't even notice, but the band director knows. He's right there. He knows exactly how it all should fit together. The chorus director knows. They know when the note is just off. God knows who we are. And he knows when the things of our heart are not authentic. He knows when the things that we're doing are to be seen by other people instead of to be communicated with him. He understands who we are within. Now, how does authenticity apply to forgiveness? And we oftentimes tag this little piece onto the end of the Lord's Prayer, but it's almost its own little thing in verses 14 and 15, where Jesus says, "For if you forgive others their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses." The things we do and the things God do, they relate to each other. And if we truly forgive, we are truly forgiven. If we're not just forgiving to look how great I am, that I'm able to overcome all the things that I should feel, the need for vengeance and forgive, if we're not that, but instead we truly forgive. And how do we want God to forgive us? We know what he's capable of. We know what he can do because he's told us. But do we want a God who forgives us in words only, but always holds something over us? Or do we want a God that truly forgives? Do we want to be people who forgive in words only, but when there's an opportunity to bring up that wrong again, to use it again, to get our way, to make the other person feel guilty or beholden, do we want to bring that up again, or do we want to truly forgive and let it go? I have no doubt the one we want from God, or at least the one I want from God. All that stuff I have messed up on and asked his forgiveness for, I don't want him to pull that file out and remind me of it. And we should do the same with others. We should truly forgive. And how does authenticity apply to fasting? Now, we could just leave this part out, couldn't we? We don't really do a whole lot of fasting nowadays. We don't think about it much. But yet Jesus does mention it. And I think we can see something true about how we do things in this too. And when you fast, do not look gloomy like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces, and their fasting may be seen by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. Or as Eugene Peterson puts it in the Message, when you practice some appetite-denying discipline to better concentrate on God. And I really kind of like this part because we will overlook fasting a lot, but sometimes we will give things up to try to concentrate more on God. Maybe you want to watch less TV. Maybe you want to have headphones in your ears less than you do. Maybe you want to spend less time on things that are kind of meaningless and spend a little more time on God. When you're doing that, don't make a production out of it. It might turn you into a small-time celebrity, but it won't make you a saint. We're looking for all of our praise in the wrong place. We're looking for all of the adoration in the wrong place. But when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, that your fasting may not be seen by others, but by your Father who is in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Does it matter to us who is watching? And oftentimes it does, as we talked about at the very beginning this morning. Mom, 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 mom. We want to be seen. How often do kids do something, and immediately as it's done, they're playing a sport, they're doing something at school, and they come to you immediately after it's over and say, "Did you see that?" Who is our "did you see that"? Do we want the people around us to see it? Do we want the people at church to see it and be impressed by it? Or do we want God to see it and be pleased by it? And I hope by now you have noticed a common thread in these 18 verses. None of them are about what we see in other people. None of them are about, look at how that person does all of this and how they're doing it for all of the wrong reasons. Because we may be right about that, but I will tell you something, I have been wrong about that too many times to count at this point in life. Someone I was just sure was doing whatever this religious thing was to be seen by others, only to find out they didn't care about that at all. They were just pleasing God, and other people happened to notice. None of this is about our making sure someone else is doing this right. It's all about looking inside our own walls. It's all about looking on the inside of me, and am I doing these things for the right reason? In Genesis 11:4, I'm going to take you back here of all places. David took us through a lot of Old Testament stuff last week that all tied together into what we're doing now, and I love that. I think of this immediately, the Tower of Babel. These people come together, they are doing amazing things, they want to build this tower to the sky, and why do they want to build it? In Genesis 11:4 it says, "Then they said, 'Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth.'" Or the way Peterson says it in the Message, "Then they said, 'Come, let's build ourselves a city and a tower that reaches heaven. Let's make ourselves famous so that we won't be scattered here and there across the earth.'" Their reason for getting together and building that tower was people. What is our motivation? Because if you think about how that story ends, it doesn't end well, does it? There is not a Tower of Babel reaching to the sky that we can go visit today. They had to stop. Their languages were dispersed. They dispersed all around, and everything changed from that moment forward because God was not pleased with what they were doing, not because of what they were doing, but because they were doing it for the wrong reasons. Their motivation was wrong. Or Paul puts it this way in Galatians, "For am I now seeking the approval of man or of God? Am I trying to please man? If I were trying to please man, I would not be a servant of Christ." We tend to speak in a lot of black or white, right or wrong, rigid ways when it comes to Christianity. This one is pretty clear, and we don't talk about it nearly as much. We can please God, or we can please people. We have a choice. And too often, if we truly look at the things we're doing, we're looking to please people instead of God. We live to please an audience of one. God's not in a box seat somewhere. He is here among us. And we live only to please him. So this morning, what is inside your walls? If we were to look inside there, is it everything we would hope to see, or is what's on the outside so different than what's on the inside? When we bought our house, we got a home inspection. And there were a lot of things in that home inspection that I understood, and there were some things that happened that I didn't know were going to happen. And the guy went into our garage where the circuit breaker box was, and he opened up the breaker box, and I thought, well, he's just looking at that. Maybe he's going to flip a few things, make sure all the switches are good. And then he took the entire facing off of the breaker box, which I didn't even know was possible. And he took it off, and there behind it, what you could see was all these wires coming in from either side. Greg is either pleased or having nightmares right now. You see all these wires coming in from different sides, and I didn't know you could even look at that. And when he looked at it, he smiled. I said, "Is it okay?" And he said, "This is like artwork." And I thought, maybe to you, but I'm not putting that behind the couch or anything like that. He said, "This is like artwork, and I don't know who did your electrical, but they take pride in what they do." And I was happy because I knew there was about to be a giant outflow of money that came as a result of all of this. But it was good to know that the person who was behind all that was hidden was doing it the right way. And for us, as we leave here today, is what is behind, is what is in the heart correct? Is what is in the heart there to please God, or are we just putting on a show for other people? And if this has been a show for you, I hope you will change that today. If this has been something that is just outward, hoping people would notice, I hope that changes today and you realize that it doesn't matter if people are pleased with what you're doing if God is not. And ultimately, we live to please God. This morning, if you'd like to begin a walk with him, be baptized into Christ, and start to live a life that pleases him, let this be the day that happens. Or this morning, if you've been living with the wrong motivation, change it today. This morning, if people around you have hurt you, if you have been harmed some way in trying to live for God, know that your family is here and that we want to help you move in the right way. We're glad to pray for you, help you however we can. If there's anything we can do with as your church family, please come while we stand and sing.